Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this Your Overseas Home webinar. My name is Christopher Nye, Senior Editor at Your Overseas Home and Portugal Property Guides. It's great to have you all with us, whether you're with us live or you're catching up on demand. And today we are chatting with Sofia Vicente, I hope I pronounced that right, who is a lawyer from Matlaw in Portugal. Whereabouts are you in Portugal right now, Sofia?
Well, it depends on the part of Portugal that you're in. In Lisbon, it's quite cloudy and rainy, but I heard that in the Algarve, everything is fine as usual.
Okay, great. Well, it's certainly warm here, but still we can't wait to get to Portugal. And so it would be great if you could just start by giving us a quick summary as to who you are and how Matlaw can help our listeners today, and then we get onto the presentation shortly.
Well, of course, it's a pleasure to be here today. This is a process that we strongly encourage to be very well structured, and having a legal representative always assists to having the least worries possible within this kind of bureaucracies, dealing with several parties and etc. So legal representatives are always a good way to lower your worries to a minimum, and Matlaw always provides a full service to all our clients. So we are glad to assist in these kind of matters.
Okay, great, thank you. And if you have any questions, so we'll have a presentation for about 20 minutes. But if you have any questions, do please type them into the question box on the right-hand side, and we will get your questions answered hopefully during the course of this afternoon. But if we don't have time for them all, we will get back to you afterwards. We will also send you a copy of the presentation, so you can remind yourself of anything you've forgotten. And of course, Sofia and her colleagues' contact details will be there, so you can contact her directly. In fact, we would urge you to, because it is very important to get this process right, obviously. So, Sofia, take it away. Tell us all about buying a property in Portugal.
Thank you very much, Christopher. So, good afternoon, everyone, once again. As Chris said, my name is Sofia. I work at Matlaw. I'm an associate lawyer, and Matlaw's main focus is dealing with real estate process, purchasing, selling, and matters related. Also, we deal with relocation process and other stuff like construction processes and anything that our clients might need with regards to their real estate and their properties. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the legal process of buying a property in Portugal, and what from our experience are the main steps and concerns that our prospective clients come to us with, or we deal during the process. To start off, we'll get a step behind and think a little bit about what you should consider before starting this process. Then we'll talk a little bit about main requirements that you'll have to meet to be able to make the acquisition. What are considered the main steps of the process itself, and we'll briefly talk about post-completion matters as well, like tax obligations, payments that you'll be obliged to make after acquiring the property, and if it's something that you would like to discuss, or at least think about it, possible ways to profit with this investment. So to start off, before you start reaching out to agents or reaching out to a legal representative or to someone that is selling a house in Portugal, it is important that you have a well structured, or at least an idea of how you would want to make the investment, or how are you able to do it. For example, the type of investment that you are willing to make. If you're going to buy a property for commercial purposes, a touristic property, or a property for habitation purposes, where you can divide it to be either your permanent habitation or a secondary one, which you will be able to rent or profit in any kind. If it is your permanent habitation, you will also have to rethink about relocation process. Another step that is important to be aware of is the vehicle of investment that you will choose or you are able to make. If it is a personal investment or if you're acquiring the property through a company, we can also make registrations of foreign companies in Portugal. And in the end of the day, how are you going to purchase it? Is it a cash purchase or a cash with mortgage purchase? These will impact, as it's normal too, the whole process, either its costs or timelines. And therefore, the availability of the funds will also be important to establish reasonable timelines. If we know that you are going to secure a mortgage in Portugal, this will take at least another couple of months. So, to deal with the bank, the mortgage agents, making evaluation of the property, and etc., which will always have additional costs. Besides that, when you're thinking about purchasing a property, if your top gap is, for example, $300,000, you'll have to be aware that you'll have like at least a 10% adding of costs related to the purchase. So maybe if that's your top gap, you'll have to decrease the price of the property that you are searching for. And these are all important questions to answer or at least consider before starting the purchase price, which is also a part that you can discuss with your legal representative. For example, at Matlaw, we like to provide our clients with a provisional breakdown of costs related to the purchase, and those will always come around the purchase price of the property. Other things to be considered in the purchase of buying is what do you have to have or what conditions you need to meet before you are able to complete the process. You can start it, but by the end of the process, you'll have to secure some things, namely related to your tax situation. Everyone is obliged to have a non-fiscal tax number in Portugal to be able to acquire a property, and therefore you also be obliged to have a fiscal representative, which your legal representatives might be. Matlaw is the fiscal representative of the majority of our clients. And afterwards, you'll have to secure an accountant contact, which per usual, your legal representatives also have a trustworthy contact to share with you or several. Other things are that you'll have to be to hold mandatory documents either from the property and from the sellers to be able to go to the notary's office, make the registration, check if you are able to, if they don't have, for example, tax debts or anything that will prejudice the purchase. For example, the property has mandatory licenses, mandatory certificates, either from the city councils or the land registry office. And from the sellers, depending if it is an individual person or a company, the documents will always also vary. Getting to the process itself, not that the earlier considerations are not important, they are the base of the structure. We can and we usually divide the process in three main steps, not all mandatory, but usually standard ones or advisable ones. You'll start with structuring the purchase, the financing, the budgeting, as we were speaking. And sometimes, when dealing with agents and etc., there might be a time where you make an offer letter or you sign a reservation agreement or a letter of intent to be presented to the seller and hopefully accepted. This is something that is common to occur. If you have a legal representative earlier, you'll be able to deal with these matters easily. If you're not, probably after these specific documents are the key point to contact a lawyer. What you can do, and depends on the property and the process of buying itself, you can carry out a survey done by an engineer to the property to make sure that no structural defects or anything are registered, so that you can also assure your position as better as possible. And for that matter, we also have the habit to provide our clients with a legal due diligence on all the documents that are provided to Matlaw, namely registry, council's certificates, plans of the property if needed, or a technical survey report if it exists. Afterwards, and speaking about the contractual part itself, usually the next step is to negotiate and sign a promissory agreement. The deposit is done by a regime of a non-refundable one. It's not like an escrow or anything. There are certain conditions on the promissory contract that will allow for the deposit to be refundable, but they are very narrow circumstances that allow that. And finally, you'll go to the only actual mandatory step of the process, that is the deed of purchase and sale. If any conditions need to be met prior to that, for example, you carried out a technical survey and some fixings need to be done and were undertaken by the seller, until these are not met, you cannot sign the deed of purchase and sale. Once everything is settled, you go to the deed of purchase and sale. You'll pay the taxes like property transfer tax, stamp duty, notary fees, and registration fees as well. So the next steps are making the registration of ownership before the land registry office and the tax authorities, and change ownership of the contracts of the services connections existence on the property itself, and others that you might want to pardon me that you might want to secure. And then, or before then, you can think about, okay, I bought a property, I made an investment, is there any way I can profit with it, or any way that I can uh, reimburse part of my investment? And that's something that we will discuss as a post completion matter. But prior to that, and no one likes it, but we have to talk about it: tax obligations, payments obligations. Being a property owner in Portugal entails that you pay the property's monthly costs, as you usually do, the property annual tax that is paid to the tax office. And for example, 2023's taxes will only be due in 2024. So it is always paid in the year followed the one that they are subject. When you acquire property that is usually under an horizontal property regime, you will be subject to the payment of condominium fees as well. And one thing that we always like to highlight is that it's very important that you have all the invoices issued from services or payments done in Portugal to be issued under your Portuguese fiscal number. And why is that? Firstly, because being related to your payments in Portugal, they will be considered for your annual tax returns, which can lead to a lower income to be paid, or even a refund to be to received. And therefore, the last obligation that we like to highlight is paying when due annual tax returns in Portugal. Also, a reason why you'll need an accountant. Lastly, You have the investment. What can you do with it? If you want to relocate to Portugal and make it your permanent habitation, the main focus of profit will be selling it for a higher price, taking into account capital gains tax and other matters that I that are important. Pardon me. And let's say in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, having that into consideration. If you're buying a property to come for a few weeks in the summer or for a few months a year, you can, if possible, rent it. For example, you have two ways to do it: either long-term rentals, which usually the lower timeline to be signed for is 1 year, but there are exceptional cases where you can lower it for less time. For example, for study matters um, of the tenant, or now with the digital nomads, there are also other exceptions for this. And if it's allowed, depending on the type of the property and the place in Portugal where it's located, depending on the council, you will be able to do short-term rentals, which we call like the lodgings activities, Airbnb, etc. So these are two ways that you can consider to profit with your real estate. Uh, when talking about short-term rentals, you'll have to deal with a licensing process before the city council. It's not very time consuming, but it can take like up to 2 or 3 months, and this is considered a business activity. So it will also, sorry, impact your income, your early income, and your annual tax returns accordingly. I think these are the main steps and concerns that usually are raised to us, or that we advise or highlight during processes to our clients. And please address any questions related to it, and we can discuss it a little bit now. I think that's okay for you, Chris.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. A really comprehensive overview. Incidentally, in our last survey, we asked people who'd already bought property in Portugal how easy it was, whether it was harder or easier than they expected, and the vast majority said it was much easier than they expected. It was no problem. So I would urge viewers not to have any fears about it. Get yourself a lawyer, and it's probably going to be much easier than you expect. However, we do have some questions. My first question is actually, when should we be contacting you? Because I would imagine it's not when we found the property and have a document in front of us. Perhaps we should contact you before we go.
Hopefully, please contact a lawyer before signing anything. If you want to discuss the structure of the purchase, contact right away, just to have some highlights or some matters that might be concerning you. But if not, when you decide on, I want this property under these terms, and the proposal was accepted, please contact us.
Okay. So we've had a few questions in which I'll just ask as we go along. Greg has asked, what are the conditions that will allow a non-refundable deposit to be refunded?
Usually, in a standard procedure, for the deposit to be refunded, it has to occur one condition that will make the purchase unviable. For example, if you are buying a property that is under a licensing process, and we usually make a conditions for you not to be obliged by the contract eternally, that says, for example, we're signing the promissory contract today, and they have an expectation to have the utilization license issued by December. So we give them like 2 or 3 months afterwards as a deadline to sign the deed, and then we make a condition saying, If we cannot sign the deed by the March of 2024, due to lack of the completion of the licensing process, the buyer can terminate the contract and be refunded of the deposit. If the termination is due to any kind of liability from the seller, the deposit will be refunded in double.
That's nice to know. So if they
That's a
decide to back
standard
out of the
procedure.
deal, they have to pay you double. Okay. And what percentage of the purchase price is the deposit?
Usually, the deposit goes between nowadays between 10 and 20%. It will
Okay.
always depend on the structure, but we advise to be the 10% is the most standard amount.
Okay. Great. Um, Angela has asked, what are the approximate legal fees? I suppose we could we
The
could, we could cover the whole. Look, well, let's talk about legal fees, but also all the buying costs that one should budget for.
Yeah, making a medium for all the costs, not including a mortgage procedure, just the taxes, legal fees, notaries, and registration, we will have to consider around 10% of the price. Meaning,
Okay.
if you have 100,000 euros purchase, you'll have to make account at least 110,000 euros, just to be on the
Sure.
safe side.
Absolutely. Okay. Um, so, and for the legal processes, do I need to be in Portugal or for the signing and everything?
No, we can do anything on behalf of our client, everything and anything on behalf of our clients. We draft a power of attorney that we only ask to be signed and notarized where the client lives. For example, if you live in the UK, you just have to go to a notary's office, ask for it to be authenticated, and then post to Portugal. We will receive the original and do everything with that power of attorney on your behalf, always after strict instructions from the clients. That's how Matlaw works.
Okay, great. What if I'm coming out there with a view to buying a property? What paperwork am I going to need to bring with me?
Okay, so if you want to buy a property, what we'll need will be identification documents from the purchasers, considering they are individual persons. If it's a company, the documents will be slightly different, but majorly identification documents, information regarding that's more for KYC purposes, like proof of employment, proof of residence. Um, and if it's, for example, a married couple, we will need to have both the documents for both of them and the place where they were married, to understand what kind of assets regime, which is something that we have in Portugal, shall be applied when dealing with their matters here.
Okay. Now, what kind of you touched on taxes, but what taxes are we going to have to pay up front, and which ones are we going to have to pay sort of ongoing as we own a property?
Okay, so under the purchase procedure, there are two main taxes that need to be paid at the moment of completion. You sign the deed and you pay them directly to the notary's office. Usually, we have the documents with the payment details from the tax office. And these are property transfer tax, which will be a tax rate related to the purchase price. For example, if it is, these are not the accurate amounts, but for you to have a slight idea, if you for from 100,000 to 200,000, you'll be charged 5% in tax, in property transfer tax. And then you have the second one, which is stamp duty, and this is equal for any kind of property and any purchase price, which is merely 0.8% of the purchase price.
Okay, great. Angela has asked, should you organise a Portuguese bank account before you
It's
start the
easy
buying
if you
process?
do. It's easy if you do majorly for the purpose of making the post completion payments, the recurrent
Mhm.
payments of utilities, the annual tax, which I didn't talk about earlier in the previous question. But this is the only tax that you'll have to pay ongoing after the purchase price, which it's not usually very high, so it's a lower one, and it's evaluated according to the tax office valuation of the property. And regarding the bank account, it's easier if you have for post completion matters, but for the purchase process itself, it's not needed because Matlaw and your lawyers are supposed to have a client's bank account where we can receive your funds coming from any part of the world. It is an euro account, so in Portugal, you don't have any problems with payments, and we make all the payments on your behalf.
Okay. And roughly what sort of timescales are we talking about from viewing a property that we really like to actually buying there?
It will depend on the process. I feel like I'm constantly repeating myself, but there are processes more straightforward than others. Imagining a property, cash purchase, individual name, already licensed without any kind of problems or lack of documentation thereof. I would say uh, 2 to 3 months to not be in a rush. But for example, I have a process now that we are actually representing the sellers, but the buyers are already had the mortgage approved, and so in 1 month we are going to make completion.
Okay. O- okay, that's fantastic. Very, very quick. Okay. So you've so quite a few things. The answer has been, well, it depends, which I guess is just inevitable. So, but is there anything that is there anything that you find that people don't realise that they haven't that you have to explain to British people or international buyers every time that they haven't perhaps got used to?
Our experience is that British clients are the ones that are less confused about the proceedings, or when we say that something is mandatory or we don't advise to take some kind of risks, they're the most cautious ones. So from our experience, they are easier to deal with. Um, because they understand that the regimes are different, and if they come to us, they trust us, and they know that we will make the best on their behalf. But I think that the most important thing is the deposit thing, because I know it's most common in the UK and the US to deal with it through escrows, and that's something that almost never occurs in Portugal. So I'd say that's the main point. And the second one, it has to deal with city council's procedures and the licenses that are required, and why almost everyone in Portugal has illegal constructions and the way to deal with it. I think that those are the main two focal points.
Okay. Sharon has asked, if you're not a Portuguese citizen, do you pay those ongoing fees? Not sure which fees that was that you mentioned, but
I think probably it was related to the tax, like the property
sure.
annual tax,
Yeah.
maybe.
Mhm.
But yes, everyone has to pay them because you'll be registered in the Portuguese tax office, and you'll have a property in Portugal. So either is the annual tax return, the IRS, or the IMI, which is the annual property tax. You'll be obliged to pay them.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Well, I mean, sorry, not great that you have to pay tax,
Yeah.
but never mind. We have run out of time. On the subject of tax, we do have another Portugal webinar that talks specifically about tax. That is coming up, if memory serves, on the 21st of September. And then we have another one that covers the whole of the buying process. That's on the 28th of September. So do register for those. There are Sophia's contact details or the contact details of Matlaw. We also have our virtual show, a date for the diary. That's on Saturday, the 11th of November, where I'm sure Sophia will be there. I will be there. We'll be covering everything over the course of a whole day. It's like your first viewing trip in Portugal. You can get everything organized, as well as seeing thousands of properties. But for now, thank you, Sophia. Thank you for watching, and good luck in your search to buy a property in Portugal.
Thank you, Chris. It was a pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.